So based on the podcasts that I have seen, and granted, I don't see all of them, but if I'm talking about the big ones, the academics and the Adam 22s and stuff like that, I feel like that besides Carisha and her little wild ass, I think it is unheavily weighted towards men having conversations where, and even this, God bless y'all and thank you for having me, but it's 3 men and me, right? There's not a whole lot of relationship conversations that are women-run podcasts. Most of the bigger podcasts are run by men.
I disagree.
I'll push back on that.
Okay, well then I said from my limited exposure.
I think most
so
women-run podcasts are relationship podcasts.
Yeah,
that's okay. Facts. I will say that, but the point is that I don't think anybody's ever going to be tired of those conversations or not want those conversations until and unless we all come together and have a wonderful kumbaya, which I don't think is ever going to happen. Men are always going to be men. Women are always going to be women. We have our way of thinking. Y'all have your way of thinking.
We can kumbaya on the To Be Fair show.
Segue into body count. I think that body count is, I think not just body count. I think anything. You cannot change what you have done, what you have said. There's nothing at all that once a moment has happened in time that it can ever be changed. Period. Once you shoot a gun, that person is dead. Once you call somebody a bitch, you've said it. Once you whatever, there you go. There's a baby coming out the other at some point.
Or you can use contraception.
Yeah. Or not.
I wasn't gonna say I wasn't gonna go baby, but I was gonna say that nut was bust.
You cannot, just like Tone said, he found God, right? You are who you are until something happens that makes you be somebody else. So just because a woman has 50, 70, 100 men on her body count, the day she wakes up and decides that you're the one she wants to be with for the rest of her life, you're the one.
And just for the record, and I agree with everything you just said, but just for the record, if you do such a thing, you're not a born again virgin because you decide today. No, that's not a thing. That's not a thing. Just for the record.
The thing that's funny is I say that. Wow, my grandmother said this to me, and I imparted it to my child, and I have lived this. Every time you have sex with somebody, you share a piece of yourself with that person. So, how many pieces of yourself do you want in the world? That's what my grandmother told me. So that my decision to have my body count be whatever it will be that we will not name,
right,
was based on that. Now, I think that there is a point in time where you're like, I'm going to enjoy my 20s and I'm going to snort cocaine and drink, 5 bottles of vodka, whatever, and whatever happens, right? I think everybody goes through that, but any sober, sane person is going to make a choice. The other thing I think that this is, I'm going to go all the way out here and then you guys can bring it back. The other thing I think is that we don't teach women how to masturbate. And I say that because I met a girl. So So our society. So when Quint was coming around my house, I had 45 godsons basically. And like the 3 or 4, they were all that people were coming to my house recording. There's just a lot of men coming around my house. And but there were some girls. And one of the girls, they called her a crew bop. She hit off, like, I think we counted 17.
Hold on.
No, but let me just finish the story.
What was the name? Crew bop?
They called her the crew bop.
Crew bop.
This girl, God bless her, sweetest girl ever. Let me finish the story, John. Dang. So she came to my house one day, and I called myself counseling her, and I was like, I know of at least 17 of my sons that you have, been with. Why is that? She said, well, Miss Amy, I really like sex. I just like sex. I said, okay, well, why don't you masturbate? Oh, I couldn't do that. That's nasty. So masturbation is nasty, but hitting off 17 men who know each other is not. See? And that's the problem. So there's an episode of Oprah where Dr. Laura was talking. I'm going to make this short. I'm not going to give you the whole rundown, but basically it was a story about sex. And Dr. Laura said the problem is that men can discover their penis all on their own. Y'all find it, it's there. You figure out what happens with it. Women are not, unless somebody tells you that it's okay or teaches, or you accidentally find it, which is not that easy to do. Women don't understand that. So what happens is the first time a woman is with a man or another woman, first time she's with somebody and that person makes her feel that way, she feels like she has to find a person to make her feel that way.
She's connected.
So then what happens is if you really enjoy that feeling, you're going to keep pursuing it. in whatever way you can, and that's going to contribute to your body count.
And you're going to also falsely like inflate the people that can make you feel that way.
Exactly. And so if masturbation was more a comfortable topic, and if women especially were encouraged, you know what, you're in control of what you feel and how you feel it, then they wouldn't be out, because like I said, that girl literally thought that touching herself was something disgusting and nasty. So she let other people touch her, and her body count, we only could count at 17 that we knew of. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a contribution to that, as so that's my comment on body count. I don't know why this man
looking at me.
Thank you very much.
I will answer the question.
17. That was the number.
17. No, but based on our understanding, it was well above that. Yes. You know what I mean? But I just honestly, the only reason why I had the body count thing as a conversation, I just think it's a hilarious conversation. I was trying to put it in more of a fun kind of thing.
Oh, did I just take it down?
No. It's still a fun conversation. It still could be a fun conversation, but I will answer Johnny's question about, do you think whether we should just kind of chalk the relationship conversations on podcasts? To me, I think that it is doing more on the surface, and they call it like a gender war. On the surface, I think that in live time now, it seems as though it's a war. I don't really think that it's a war. I honestly think it's literally the only reason why it's called a war is because now men have been hearing the things we've been doing our entire lives.
Right.
So now you're hearing men speak about their wants and desires openly. Now it's a war. No, but it's not a war. At the end of the day, I think as time continues on, I think that we will have a better understanding of what each other are looking for. Because men we weren't vocal trying to actually tell, even with our partners.
Right.
We were being, just going through and then never saying anything because we don't want to have the conversation that it's going to that's going to happen after I tell you what I don't like. I only want to have the conversation, so I'll just keep that in. And then we've allowed people to go along their lives thinking that, he's always been the problem. Every relationship I've been in, it's always been him, and it's really our fault. So now that men are vocalizing their concerns and what they will and will not put up with, I think that we'll have a better generation of people looking to be with one another. I think that the conversation is also, it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
But I think that it's very constructive for us to have platforms that not necessarily discuss it in a bashing way. You know what I mean? But I think it's beneficial for people to hear, to people to have to be held accountable.
Yeah.
It's beneficial. If there's no accountability, then where are we going to go if we just continue to lead? You know what I mean? To lead everything, we're going to have more single parent households. You know what I mean? We're going to have more divorce. The high divorce rate will continue to increase. These conversations are sparking conversations within relationships to where people are be able to get to know each other even better. And you know what I mean? Open the lines of communication amongst each other. I think that it's very beneficial.
Go ahead.
I want to respond to that, especially since he's answering my question. I want to give a little more.
You go right ahead.
A little more insight into where my conversation, my question didn't necessarily come from the gender war aspect. Wasn't thinking about like what women are saying about men having. My question was, should we not listen to relationship podcasts just based on all the shit I'm hearing from men talking? And I hear men, they're on this one side where they're like, you got to provide. And if you're not providing and protecting the family, you're not a real man.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also hearing on the other side where men have to be more emotionally open and emotionally intelligent for their partner and all of their shit. And to me, in my head, when I listen to both of them podcasts, there's not enough space for both of them podcasts, because it's like, if I'm 100% protecting and providing, then like, shouldn't I get grace for not being emotionally available? And if I'm emotionally available, shouldn't I also have grace if I can't 100% protect and provide? And my only thing was like, there's two different spectrums of the conversation, and I've seen both sides. I'm a person that understands both sides. But my thing is, we should stop listening to either one of them sides And as a people, we're having relationships in real time with real people. Like, we should start looking at our partners and our women and like just worrying about like, how can I be the best partner? What makes sense for me? What makes sense for I'm dealing with this woman and she's bringing XYZ to the table. How can I be a good partner to this woman? And you don't necessarily have to be the whole protector, provide, or like a lot of the relationship conversations are only based on like the extremes of what we're talking about, like even politically, but like the extremes when it comes to traditional versus modern relationships.
Well, I think it's also like love languages, right? So, for me, I don't need a provider.
Right.
Do I need a protector? Yeah. Do I need somebody who I need intellectual stimulation? That's me. My daughter is different. My best friend is different, right? So I think that's the same thing with men. You are a protector provider type of a person. So the woman you are with is going to, if you pick the right woman, which I'm assuming you have, she's gonna. That's that you meet.
That's what she's gonna value.
That's what she wants, right?
She gonna value that.
So I think what happens is, even going all the way back to the Cheesecake Factory conversation, you have to find the person who is, and this is so cliche, but the yin to your yang, right? Mm-hmm. The yin to your yang is that, you have to find somebody who, when you meet that person, they balance whoever it is you are. And even if we talk about the guy that was on there, that's, an effeminate dude, he is confident in his masculinity. He may be somewhat effeminate, but so is Prince. You find the woman who wants that and who likes that. And if you are heterosexual, but you like to be fashionable, find a woman who wants to style you. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. I think that's but about the podcast, I think what's missing in the podcast is exactly to your point. They're too heavily weighted. If you look at, and again, I'm talking about the bigger ones that I know of, but even the ones, if you say the ones that are mostly women, you have, the Wendy Williams or Carisha or whatever, which is women talking to women, and then you have men talking to men.
Poor minds, Carisha, please.
Right, but even if you look at Breakfast Club, right, it was 3 dudes and a woman. Mm-hmm. We're 3 dudes and like, and it might be the other way around. It could be 3 women and 1 man, but it's, I have yet to see the only podcast that I ever saw that had somewhat of a balance. It had like 4 dudes and a whole table of girls. And but all the girls were bubbleheads. They were all like,
you're talking about Fresh and Fit.
Yes.
That's not a good example.
Exactly. But that's the only one I've ever seen. That's the only one I've ever seen that had, and it wasn't even a balance. But I think if you have podcasts where you actually have people on an equal level of intelligence and you have a balance of male and female, and you have a balance of conversation, it can be productive. I think the reason that some of them are, to your point, are not productive is because, you put a whole bunch of men in the room, they're going to bash women. You put a whole bunch of women in the room, they're going to bash men, right? If everybody's in the room together, you kind of have to play nicer.
And so the thing is, when I say like, and why I say we shouldn't like, well, each individual should listen to what they feel is productive for their scenario. But at the end of the day, I think that, like, I know for me, right, getting the going from Kevin Samuels was like the first voice I heard that was
Godfather.
That was the first voice I heard of a man that was actually like being upfront about the way that he kind of, you know what I mean, the way that he thought, you know what I mean, about women, and was unapologetic about it. And over time of listening to that, then it was like, okay, I understand what his point is. So now it's time to move on, to hear some more information, to figure out how I actually feel about the thing. You know what I mean? I had never I was more of the like, do what my part is. I ain't really into doing a whole bunch of talking. Or I say my piece, I'm done at that point. You say your piece, and we can agree to disagree very, very too often. Right. I was willing to agree to disagree. But in order for me to find where I really thought, you know what I mean, where I felt like was productive in the way that I understand, in the way that I can articulate, I had to learn that by seeing a bunch of these different conversations and then seeing which ones were actually valuable for me. You know what I mean? And because if it wasn't for that, I know that my understanding and my understanding of leadership in the traditional style is better from listening to different opinions. And these opinions wouldn't have come from just the people around me, because there's not too many people living in my scenario that can tell me certain things. And it was definitely beneficial for me to listen to these different things and then kind of figure out what I believe. But if you just a person that's regurgitating a whole bunch of stuff that you just hearing, then that's, you know what I mean? And you just believe in what folks saying. That if you just doing that, then yeah, I'm sorry, bro. You got to think a little bit deeper than on the.
No, I was talking to Johnny, not you. Keep on.
Yeah, okay. Continue. Yeah. I wasn't cutting you.
Hey, where did Johnny Cup at, bro?
I don't know.
Bro, no way. He said
about to throw this man cup in the trash.
Right. Bro, what the fuck? He said something and you were talking.
No, I just did this and then you started waving and doing all this.
He was just getting my attention that he was going next.
Well,
bro.
no, I was trying to get his attention to tell him something.
All right.
All right, bro. I was trying to get his attention. Don't take my cup. Don't fucking touch my cup, nigga.
All right,
don't touch my cup, nigga.
All right, so if I understand the actual statement that you said is pretty much the fact that it's polarizing, we shouldn't listen to none of them and throw it all away. Is that like the summary of what you're saying about relationship podcast? You said some people are saying that you should be in touch with emotional intelligence. No. Some people say be a man. And because they disagree with each other, throw it all away?
No, what I was saying is everybody's relationship is going to be different. Mm-hmm. And you should focus on what's real life and what's actually in front of you and not listen to podcasts to dictate how you deal and work in relationships. That's my only point, is because you can listen to all these podcasts, but you can deal with something that's in front of you that's contradictory to how this podcast might tell you to feel. It don't mean it don't work for you. It mean that podcast or whatever, it might not be in the same lane that you're dealing with.
I think you have to also think about the intellectual level of the people who are watching the podcast. Mm-hmm. Because, for example, Andrew Tate. Me watching Andrew Tate and a 16-year-old boy watching Andrew Tate is two totally different results. Right. And I can watch Dr. Umar and listen to 70% of what he has to say and say, you know what, he's 100% right. And 30% of what he has to say is completely against everything that I believe. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Andrew Tate. Same thing with Kevin Samuels.
Most podcasts.
You know, like Kevin Samuels. And again, there's clickbait too. So the first time I saw Kevin Samuels, I was like, oh, hell no. Right. Yeah. And I was like, I will go toe to toe with that man. And, you know, high value man, blah, 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 blah. Well, I'm a high value woman. But then when I started seeing the girls he was talking to and what they were saying, what they were, you know, then I was like, okay, I kind of see where he's right.
Sort of be like, let me not.
I have discernment. I have the intellect for discernment. And it ties all the way back to what we were talking about with religion, right? Because I studied Christianity and I studied that, you know, I took what I wanted from all of those different things to base my foundational belief. Same thing with these podcasts, but you have to realize that there's a lot of people, and I'm not saying I'm the smartest person in the world, but there's a lot of people who don't have the same level of intellectual discernment, and they're gonna, you know, my favorite thing right now on Netflix and all these things, cult things. Watch NXIVM, watch Twin Flame. These are like amazing to me because it shows how manipulative the spoken word can be. And if you know, people will follow a cult leader if they are speaking anything and they ignore all of the red flags. And I think that goes back to a lot of these podcasts too, is you have people who are spewing things and somebody finds one kernel that resonates with them and then they blow it out and say everything this person has to say is the truth. And I think that that's the problem, is that people don't have enough discernment to separate what's good and what's bad.
I think that my answer to it would be simply, well, I think it's a couple folds, but I think the main thing, and it kind of encapsulates a little bit of what you were saying, is that audience matters. So like who you're talking to, if your audience and like you're like Fresh and Fit, for example, I'll just use them as like a small example where they speak to the high value man, but in general, their audience are regular people. And so their advice doesn't match up to it. Instead of like saying, let's have nobody listen to no relationship podcasts, because I think that there's a healthy space where from our podcast to many podcasts, there's a humanization.
This ain't no relationship podcast.
Our whole first season was relationship shit. But like the reality is that from our podcast to many other podcasts is there's a humanization of a lot of regular things. Whether it is a traditional perspective or a very modern perspective, I think that what's better and more healthier is let's have more podcasts that talk to the regular person. And whether it's the regular guy that is inside a traditional space or inside a modern space, and like actually humanize what that really looks like and not be inside exaggerated spaces. I don't think that it's important to not listen to people because of people are in relationships. And in having that, matter of fact, I'll just throw to a conversation that all of us was having on Friday. And I think that conversation, so all right, so I'll give a little backdrop. So on Friday, we all came, we sat down, and we had a really good conversation. It was about 4 of us. And because of we've all expressed a lot of things, it was so much easier to have that conversation. And to me, the fact of like the conversation is in the air, it's so much easier to be vulnerable because everybody's expressing said thing. And that's my main part to it is that I think that is less of an, like, of course I think everybody will always say, let's deal with less extremes, but I think it probably is good to have like really average people talk about regular relationships to normalize it and not compare it to Will and Jada, not compare it to Jay-Z and Beyonce, not compare it to, and I can go down the line, but yeah.
No, I think I'll go ahead and that was a good conversation, man. I appreciate Miss Amy for pulling up on us.
Yes, for sure.
Definitely. Anytime.
Definitely.
I like to talk.
Definitely gave us a different perspective that we might, especially in a lot of the relationship, even the religious conversation.
Religion, political.
A lot of a different perspective we may not have arrived to on our own. So we appreciate you for coming second time.
Well, I would say what I hope is I try to be careful with my words and say I believe and I think and not tell you what you believe or what you should think. And so whether I'm talking to people in my home, whether I'm here, whether I'm posting stuff on Instagram, whatever, I really try to present things for people to think about without trying to influence them to think the same way I have. So I hope I achieve that.
And we appreciate that.